Welcome back to the shop, everyone. This week's video takes place in 2024 week 13. That is March 25th till March 31st. And we are starting this video out by torching out that broken bolt that I showed in the last video. And the reason why is drill wasn't going to work and fire was the only way. So at this point in time, I have gotten more acetylene. And yeah, we can just very quickly just torch that out. And from there, what I'll do is I will end up putting another bolt in there. I'll weld it. Do some finishing, and then I will paint it all back up. While the paint's drying, what we're going to do is we are going to grab the intercooler and we are going to start remounting the intercooler. And at this point, I believe that I have the intercooler mounted in a good place. I'm kind of happy with it, so I'm going to pull those brackets off of there and take them over to the bench so that I can weld them, because I don't know if you kind of remember when I cut them out, but there was kind of big slits in the middle of them, and that was so I could put them in the vise and bend them to the appropriate size. And the problem is that removes a lot of the strength from it, so I want to weld up those holes so that way those brackets are solid and the intercooler isn't going to move anywhere. Before, I was able to just kind of grab on the bracket when it was mounted and work on it, so that shows how flexible it is. Before I do that though, the end came out of my cable that attaches to the magnet for the ground on the welder, so I am just going through. I'm going to quickly put a new end on it, re-end it, and this time I'll put some heat shrink on it just to hold it and give it a little bit of strain relief, because I didn't have that before and it was kind of a big problem. Alright, with those brackets welded up, it's time to just do a little bit of cleanup. Wait for those brackets to cool down, but yeah, let's just kind of get stuff a little bit cleaned up. And I kind of kick myself now for welding with the MIG so close to my brand new seat, because any single spark from that welder will just instantly melt a hole in the seat, and so it's just so stupid having it that close. I'm just like, what an idiot I am. But that's fine, the paint's dry, so I'm going to start putting these seats back together. And now that I got the sliders on, I'm gonna throw it in the car. And with the bracket in the car, just put the seat in, get the bolts all through the seat bracket, and then I can try and bolt this down. And well, with the seat in the car, it sucked. So pulled the seat out of the car, pulled the bracket out of the car. I will mount the bracket onto the seat outside of the car where I have easy access. Because putting the 4 big bolts for the seat bracket down, no problem. That's super easy when it's in the car. But trying to get these bolts around, like my subframe connectors and everything else, it's just a pain in the ass. So I started putting the bracket on, and then I realized, well, I forgot to put the seats slide on. So I gotta quickly pull the seat bracket off, put the slide handle on, and just try and see if I can make it work. And then we can bolt it all back together. So as I've been trying to get this slider to work, it has not been working at all. So the instructions weren't great. So I eventually ended up finding a video online of somebody who was freshly putting these together. And so I really took a look at their video and tried to make sure that I was doing the same things. And what I realized is I put these sliders on backwards. So I put it on so that the handle was kind of pulling. You'd have to pull down. Anyways, it's just they're in the wrong orientation. So what I'm doing is I'm pulling everything apart, pulling the sliders off. I'm going to rotate the bottom bracket, I believe, and then I'm going to swap the sliders side for side. So you can see I'm just swapping the slider there, but it didn't work because all the bolt holes were not lining up like they're supposed to. So luckily the holes are, the same distance apart, top and bottom, and on the side, so I can just flip this around, no problem there. And then I can put the sliders on the correct way, and that allows the sliders to work perfectly. Everything works as it's designed, and I'm super, super excited by that. And you can see here in a second, it's already working way better. I've got, the front sliders tightened all the way down. I can press the slider and just slide everything all the way up. Boom, easy peasy. So with that, let's get this seat back in the car. all in all, this was actually fairly easy to get the seat lifted over the bar, get it in the car, get it into place, and I am just super happy with this seat. It looks so freaking good. Let me tell you, sitting in this seat, adjusting it, playing with the pedals, I am like a kid on Christmas morning. I am just so excited. I'm kind of choked that I don't have a shifter handle hooked up yet, but I'm just going to sit here and play with myself for a bit. Well, with the seat back in the car, it's time to turn my attention to these brackets again. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grind down all the welds, make it nice and smooth. And with that, we can put the brackets back on the car and then put the intercooler back on the front of the car. Right, so now the intercooler's back on and the filter's back on, just kind of taking out a new coolant overflow tank. So this is going to attach to where the radiator cap screws in, and the idea is if the water or the coolant in the system gets too hot, it'll overpressurize the cap. The cap will bypass water into the overflow tank, and that's all it's really there for. So I need to mount this somewhere in the car and then run a hose from the overflow to it. So I'm just kind of checking to see where I might put this. I do want to put it somewhere where it's going to be accessible. So somewhere in the front of the car would probably be nice. but it's kind of hard to make a final decision without the whole front end of the car bolted up. Now, the reason why it's hard to make that decision is I got to make sure that like the headlight bezels is not in the way, it's not in the way of the fenders, stuff like that. So at this point, I'm just kind of loosely thinking, and I'll probably end up waiting until the front end is back together, and then I'll build some brackets off of the frame rails to mount it to. So we're going to carry on. I'm just kind of throwing the rest of the front end back together, kind of getting ready for startup. So I want to put all the clamps on and all that stuff. The more I look at this charge pipe, the more I don't like the fact that it just comes off and then 90 and then just very straight shot up to the intake. What I think I will likely end up doing is redoing this pipe. I'll have it kind of come 90 into the fender well and then a 90 out and down, I think. That way it's not kind of like fully angled through that where that front end is, and that would allow me to put a piece of metal across there a little bit more easily and kind of block that off and make it nicer. For right now, for test cruise, totally fine though. So what I'm doing here is just rehooking up the power steering hoses, and the reason why I'm doing this is if I'm going to fire the engine, I have the power steering pump connected. I want to be able to put fluid in the pump and then have it go into the rack. I don't want to run that pump dry. So with that all tightened down, we can throw a little bit of ATF in there. These pumps just run ATF. I don't run power steering fluid in it. And just cycling the wheel and the rack just to try and see if I can get some of the fluid moved through there. But since the pump isn't actually running, I don't know if it's actually going to go all the way down into the rack. But whatever, it's turning, it's working. Yeah, so just bring the laptop over the car. I got to reboot it before the Holley software will connect to the ECU. So while it's rebooting, I'm just going to jump under the car. I'm just going to throw a muffler on the end of the pipe, even though it's not clamped down. So, some of the exhaust will probably leak. I at least want the muffler on there to quiet it down a little bit, hopefully, maybe. And reconnecting the starter solenoid wire. Making sure that the alternator wire is not touching ground. Before I actually take this on the road, I do need to put some heat shrink over that. top up the power steering, and we can try and get this started. All right, let's go. But of course the laptop won't connect, so gotta restart it yet again. But in the meantime, I can play around with the pedals and the shifter. And laptop's back up, and it finally connected this time, I think. So with that, we can try and start it, and nothing. Will not crank. So time to start troubleshooting. I kind of know that the clutch switch is a bit of an issue on this, but I'm just going to do some other basic checking, make sure I've got power down at the starter, just because it's very quick and easy to get into the fender well, just to make sure I've got power. Yep, I got power there, so I know I've got power down to the starter. So sorry this is so dark, but I know that the clutch switch is so that's kind of just what I'm checking now, is to see if it is the clutch switch or not. So I've tested it, it's not working. Like when I push the clutch in, it doesn't activate the switch. So even with it all the way to the floor. So what I'm going to have to end up doing is I will have to order a new one. That's not a big deal for the moment. What I can do is pull the connector out of there, and then I can just jump the 2 wires. And so I end up just throwing like a large ring terminal in there, jump the 2 wires, and now I can try to start the car again. Yeah, this time car starts, it's running. I've got RPM. I can rev it a little bit, but it is running really rich. It is putting a ton of fuel through the engine, and that's okay, not the end of the world. But I'm just gonna grab a data log. I just want to see what's happening. I want to see what the engine's doing, see what it's doing for its AFR, if it's entering closed loop, how much it's adjusting. So I'm just taking a look at a few things. Now, to be fair, I am not the best tuner in the world, but I know enough to be dangerous. So I'm just checking those, a few of those things that I know about, and make sure nothing's kind of out of the ordinary. Yeah, so for the learn, I'm taking it down. Because I can smell how rich it is. This engine is super rich. So I think I end up changing the VE table in the idle range and pulling it down. But really, because I got no water in this thing, the coolant temperature sensor isn't reading the accurate temperature, so it's adding a ton of fuel because it doesn't think it's warm. So I eventually go into the AFR offset table and I knock it down a bunch. So yeah, the engine runs, it's super duper rich. One of the banks is a lot richer than the other, if I recall correctly, or yeah, one of the banks is a lot richer than the other. And then finally the car wouldn't start, battery is dead. So while I'm waiting to get a new battery, I can at least go under the car. I can throw the lower rad hose on so I can start thinking about actually putting some water into this thing. think we're the next day here. I got a new battery, so we'll pull the old one out, put a new battery in. Alright, with the new battery in, before I can put water in, there is a big hole in the radiator that had a plug in it, or just had a plastic plug in it, so I gotta pull the plastic plug out, put a metal plug in, so we're just gonna throw some Teflon tape on it, and then we will tighten that down into the radiator. And unfortunately, I don't have an AN wrench for, I believe that's a -20 AN fitting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tape up my steel crescent wrench with some electrical tape, and then I will use that in order to tighten down the connector. The tape is soft enough that, you know, as long as you don't reef on it too much, it shouldn't mark up these fittings. So it's not winter, we don't need to block off the radiator, so we can pull this cardboard out of there. And the moment I've been waiting for, let's fill this thing up with water. Ugh. So exciting that I'll actually be able to run this for an extended period of time without worrying about it overheating or anything like that. I'll be able to monitor the temperature. And what's this? We have water absolutely pissing out of the water pump. Well, that is less than ideal. You can see the puddle slowly growing on the ground underneath the car. Yeah, that's not a good thing. I don't know why I didn't have the water drain pan out earlier. I should have known this was going to happen. I think at this point in time, my mother-in-law had come out to look at the car, and so I just kind of quickly fired it up for her while it's dripping all the water. Don't run it for long, but long enough. And I just want to grab another video of it running. So between finding the water pump leaking and what's going to happen here in a few seconds, off camera I've been texting a gentleman I know, runs a shop, and I've just been asking him about what I'm seeing and what's going on. And at the end of the day, the answer here is I need to pull the water pump off and just find out what's going on underneath. So you get to watch me tear the whole front end of this car apart. Now, I decided to not pull the intercooler and the radiator out of there for some silly reason. I figured I can try doing this all with it in the car, even though it's like 4 bolts to pull the intercooler off and pull the bottom rad hose out of bottom and top hose off the radiator. I mean, it was a stupid decision to leave it in when I'm navigating around it, reaching over it, and I don't have a clear shot to some of the bolts necessarily. If I were in a parking lot and I had to do this, is leaving that stuff in a good decision if I got the front end on the car and I have the fenders on the car? Maybe. But in this in this position, I really should have just taken it all apart. But whatever. So enjoy watching me tear the whole front end of this down again. right, here we go. Last bolt on the water pump, and it is off. So now that I got it off, I am talking with my buddy again and saying like, hey, this is kind of what I got. I'm sending him pictures of the timing cover that I have, the gasket that's on the water pump, and I'm now realizing and understanding that Ford had two different timing covers, one for standard rotation, one for reverse rotation. And when I picked up this timing cover, I didn't realize that. I just knew this one didn't have the manual fuel pump provision on it, and that's what I wanted. But unfortunately, this is the wrong timing cover for this water pump. So what I have to do now is I have to pull the timing cover off. So that's even more stuff I got to pull off now. And I got to order those parts, and it's going to be about 2 weeks before I get the parts in. So it's a setback. It sucks, but this is how I'm learning. I now know there's two timing covers. Didn't know that before. And of course, the pumps just bolt up. It's the same bolt pattern, but the way the water pump inlets and outlets work is different. Kind of a shitty thing, but hey, you live and you learn. So yeah, we're gonna pull the water pump out and we're gonna start tearing this timing cover off. See, so much easier with the radiator out. Since I don't want to get anything in the oil pan, I actually leave the timing cover on for now that I have access to it. But there are some other things I can do. This procharger idler has been abused already. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up all of the threads in it. I'm going to clean up the back of the pulley, the brass. There's a brass piece that's been digging into it. So I'm just going to clean this whole thing up while I got it out. The power steering pump or the lines were leaking a bit, so I just want to clean it all up and just kind of see if I can figure out where the leak is coming from. If I have to buy a new rack, I will, but I kind of want to avoid that. And fortunately, there is a lot of work to do on this car, so even though we gotta wait for a timing cover, we can continue on. So what I'm gonna do right now is pull all the wheels off, and I'm gonna get this ready to start bleeding the brakes. Alright, so we are ready to start bleeding the brakes. Now, I have my beautiful wife, who is camera shy, sitting in the driver's seat while we work on this. And what the procedure is I open the bleeder, and I have my wife slowly stroke the brake pedal until I start getting some fluid out. And then from there, I close the bleeder. And what my wife's going to do is put some firm pressure on the pedal. I will open the bleeder until it goes down. Once it's down, I'll close the bleeder. She'll let the pedal up, and then she'll put some firm pressure on it. I'll open the bleeder. Fluid will come out. Pedal will go to the floor. She'll hold it there. I'll close the bleeder, and we will just repeat that process until there's no air bubbles coming out. And it took a while on this one, and there was still a bit of air coming out, so I was kind of suspicious on it. But I mean, you could kind of see there the line for the 6 inches was clear, so that's fine. Close that off, pull all of the fluid out of the bleeder hose, and go to the next caliper and repeat the process. So we start with the brake furthest away from the master, and then we go to the next furthest. So that was the rear right. Now we're doing the rear left, and then we're going to do the right front and then the left front. As we're bleeding the brakes, we have to constantly go up and make sure there's still fluid in the master. You never want to run dry while you're bleeding, otherwise you have just undone everything that you've been trying to do. Alright, with those bled, I can do a little bit of cleanup. So we are pulling the seat back out of the car, even though we just got it in. That is kind of the story of building a car, is you put a part on, you test fit it, you pull it back off. You put a part on, you test fit it, you pull it back off. And you just pretty consistently repeat that process. Now we are pulling the seat out of the car because I'm going to start welding some of the floor back together because I do want to take this on a road trip. But I just noticed a brake fluid leak at a couple of the fittings. So since I've noticed that, I will eventually go and tighten those, and I will have to re-bleed the brakes because that usually indicates that there's air in the system. But we're just going to continue doing some cleanup on the car, get it all vacuumed out, and just do some general cleaning. All right, now that that's cleaned, What I want to do is I am going to mount the exhaust to the car. I haven't put a hanger on it yet, so that's what we're going to do here. Mark it out. I tried drilling from the bottom, but the drill bit just keeps on walking, and I kind of realized, I know exactly where I want this hole, so I eventually just go on top of the car, drill from the inside out just because it's so much easier, and we get this hole for the hanger. Yeah, so I just go from the inside, even though I don't have any real mark. I just, based on where some of the, like that screw for the cable tie on the inside is, I knew exactly where to put that hole. So now we can put the hanger on, tighten it down, weld that to the exhaust pipe, and then cut it short. And it's at this point, since I'm under the car, I might as well tighten up all of those loose brake lines where the fluid was leaking. And then we can continue playing with the exhaust. So this pipe's really not fitting all that well anymore, and at this point I'm just like, I don't feel like dealing with this. I got other stuff to do to actually get the car on the road. If absolutely worst comes to worst, I'll just run some dumps. I don't really want to do that, but I will if I have to. So what we're going to do is we are going to put some of this flame retardant paper inside the car, cover all the wiring. And the reason why we're going to do that is because I'm going to do some welding on the floor and just weld up some of this area and kind of make it a lot nicer. I do want to put some carpet down just while I'm doing the test drive. So I just want it to look a little bit nicer. And so put all that paper there because I don't want to burn holes in the wires. That would be very bad. I'm also going to do some other patching on the passenger side because there's a big hole there right now. I'm not going to, do this all up 110%, mainly because I know that after this shakedown summer, I'm bringing the car back into the shop and I am pulling everything off of this car. So I don't see the need to do everything perfectly right now, especially when I run the risk of potentially, putting holes in wires or melting wires. No need for that. All right, so just grabbing some cardboard here, which is something I haven't done in a long time, and that's because I'm going to make a template for this driver's side floor. No, that's the passenger side floor, not the driver's side floor. So I'm going to make a template for the passenger side floor. Yeah, so that actually turned out super well. And we're going to move on to wiring for my doors. So I have what's called poppers on the doors. I don't know if that's what it's really called. It's a shaved door kit. So there's a couple of solenoids that go inside the door. I already have some. There's this receiver that receives radio signals from a button. So you press a button on a remote and then it pops the door open. Like it just remotely activates the mechanism to open the door. So we're going to start wiring this in. I'm going to put the receiver right here at the top of this board. On the other side is the fuse panel. It's the perfect spot for it because I got all the power that I need right there, and I've already run the heavy wires to the doors to this location. So we're going to mount that. We're going to get some wires run up, wires terminated. You've seen me do all this stuff before. It's nothing new. As always, I never like having more wires than needed, so fortunately I already have a Molex de-pinning tool that I used with the heater controls. So I'm just going to de-pin a bunch of this, get all the stuff out that I don't need. This has a 5 amp fuse built into it, I think, on this little crappy fuse holder. So I pull that out because I got a fuse box right on the other side of that panel. I can run my own power wire. And I'm left with these two, which is, I think, the ignition wire and then the ground wire. Or no, battery wire, ground wire? I don't remember what the yellow is. But in any case, I'm left with 2 wires out of that entire connector that I needed. So I'm just searching for the wire right now. I can't find it. I know I've got some 18 gauge right around here somewhere, and it ended up being on the bench the entire time. So anyways, I'm just going to run some wires, terminate them, do all that good stuff you've seen me do a lot. So as I'm going through all of this, I had originally run a ground wire up to the switch panel along with power wire, but then I added another ground just kind of behind the dash there. So I'm just checking here to make sure that the ground wire that's up, the extra ground wire up by the switch panel, is the ground wire. I think it is down here, so I can just cut it short because I don't need it. And it was. And so yeah, here we have power going to the power. We've got everything kind of wired up. It's kind of nice. So it's kind of around this point where I had thought to myself, you know what, I really don't want this power wire going over to the main battery lug on the right side there, because then the only fuse protecting this is the 200 amp or the 150 amp at the battery, which is not a good thing. So what I actually want to do is I want to run that power wire around to my fuse box. So I got a few extra circuits, not a big deal. So that's what I'm doing right here. I'm pulling that out, seeing if I got space. But that is all the time that we have for today. So as always, if you've stuck around this long, I'd like to thank you for viewing, and we'll catch you in the next one.